Imagine a man who never loses his temper. A polite smile always on his face. A businessman who knows every employee by name. A pillar of the community. A perfectionist who never makes a mistake. Now imagine that this same man is able to look you in the eye while orchestrating your death with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker, while calculating exactly how much time you have left to live, while having already prepared 3 contingency plans in case something goes wrong. Gustavo Fring, the smiling manager of Los Pollos Hermanos, is not just one of the most iconic villains in modern television. He is the most disturbing mirror that fiction has ever offered us about the dark side of perfectionism, about the real price of absolute control, about what happens when we transform our pain into purpose, and our purpose into obsession. Because Gus scares us not by what he does, but by how he does it, calmly, methodically, with such absolute control that it seems superhuman. He doesn't yell. He doesn't lose his composure. He doesn't act impulsively. And that's exactly what makes him terrifying. Chaotic violence is frightening. But methodical violence, executed with surgical precision, that paralyzes us because we recognize something familiar in it, something that resonates with parts of ourselves that we'd rather not admit exist. And here's the truth no one wants to admit. We all have a little bit of Gus Fring inside us. That need to control everything around us. That flawless mask we show the world while hiding the inner chaos. That resentment we keep silently, nurturing it like a poisonous plant, waiting for the right moment to bloom. How many times have you rehearsed difficult conversations in your head? How many times have you meticulously planned how you will respond to criticism, betrayal, or injustice? How many times have you felt that cold satisfaction, imagining the moment when you will finally settle the score with someone who hurt you? This is Gus Fring on a smaller scale. It's the same psychological mechanism, the same transformation of pain into control. The same illusion that if we plan everything perfectly, if we maintain composure, if we never show weakness, we will be safe. In the next few minutes, we'll decode the psychology behind the most perfectionist mind in pop culture. We'll reveal how an obsession with order can become the most dangerous form of chaos. We'll explore the Jungian concept of persona and how Gus transformed his social mask into a lethal weapon. And we'll discover what Gus Fring's journey teaches us about the true price of absolute control. Let's talk about crystallized resentment, an emotion that doesn't seek release, but execution, about how trauma can be frozen instead of processed, and about why the perfect revenge never brings the peace it promised. Because in the end, the question isn't, what makes Gus Fring so terrifying? The question is, what happens when the pursuit of perfection becomes the path to destruction? And why does this journey seem so familiar, so close to our own internal battles? Let's start with the image that Gus Fring projects to the world. The perfect mask he wears every day. A successful businessman. Owner of one of Albuquerque's most popular fast food franchises. A generous philanthropist, an active community member, an official sponsor of the local police, ironically, the same people who should be investigating him. The face of Los Pollos Hermanos, a fried chicken franchise synonymous with quality, excellence, and consistency. Gus is punctual, polite, impeccably dressed. He knows the names of his employees. He personally oversees the quality of his products. He never cancels an appointment. He never loses his temper. He never shows weakness. In other words, he is what society teaches us to aspire to. Total control over our lives, visible and measurable success, respect from the community, an impeccable reputation, an image without any cracks through which criticism can enter. And here's the point that connects us deeply with him. How many of us don't wake up every day trying to be our own version of Gus Fring? You don't need to be a drug kingpin to understand the burden of maintaining a perfect persona. You don't need to be involved in crime to feel the exhaustion of never being able to let your guard down. That professional smile you maintain in meetings when you're falling apart inside. That rehearsed calm when a client treats you badly and you want to yell but can't, because that would be unprofessional. That image of someone who has everything under control that you project on social media while anxiety corrodes your nights and you can barely sleep. Gus's mask is simply an extreme, amplified version, taken to its ultimate consequences, of what we all do daily. And the most exhausting part? That mask can never fall. Not even for a second, not even in private. Because you've internalized the performance so much that you no longer know where the mask ends and where you begin. Because the world doesn't forgive imperfection. The world punishes vulnerability with a silent but constant cruelty. Show weakness at work and you might lose the promotion. Show fragility in a relationship and you might be seen as unstable. Show that you don't have all the answers and you might lose credibility. So you smile, you perform, you control every word, every gesture, every microfacial expression. You rehearse conversations before they happen. You review emails 5 times before hitting send. You constantly monitor how you are being perceived, adjusting your performance in real time. And slowly, imperceptibly, without you realizing the exact moment it happened, you begin to wonder, where does the mask end, and where do I begin? Is there still an I behind this performance? Or have I become merely the sum of the expectations I fulfill? This is the pain that Gus Fring represents in its purest and most distilled form. The exhaustion of being perfect every single day, without exception. The profound and inescapable loneliness of never being able to be truly vulnerable with anyone. The invisible but absolutely real prison of absolute control. If you've ever felt you need to have everything under control to be respected, that any slip-up could cost you everything you've built. If you've ever been afraid that if you let your guard down for even a moment, the entire structure of your life would crumble like a house of cards. If you've ever harbored deep grudges and resentments because expressing anger or hurt would mean losing control, would mean being unprofessional, would mean showing that you're human. So you understand Gus Fring much better than you'd like to admit. And this unsettling understanding, this recognition of dark parts of ourselves reflected in him, is the first step in decoding what really happens behind the perfect mask. Because Gus didn't start out this way. He wasn't born as this cold, calculating machine. Something transformed him. And understanding this transformation is understanding the real danger of obsessive perfectionism. But Gus Fring isn't just a control-obsessed businessman. He's not simply a perfectionist taken to the extreme. He's something much more specific, much more archetypal, much more disturbing when you truly understand what drives him. Gus is the Dark King, the architect of vengeance, the empire builder driven by a single obsession that completely replaces his humanity. To understand Gus, to truly grasp what makes him so unique among fictional villains, we need to go back to Chile, to the traumatic event that transformed a man into a vengeance machine with a human face. On the death of Maximiliano Arciniega. Max wasn't just Gus's business partner. He wasn't just his co-founder in the meth operation they tried to establish with the Mexican cartel. Max was the man Gus loved, the man who gave meaning, purpose, and humanity to his life. The only person Gus could be vulnerable with. The only person who saw the man behind the mask. And Hector Salamanca, that man we later see confined to a wheelchair in Breaking Bad, incessantly ringing his bell, was the one who murdered Max. A shot to the head, a brutal and unnecessary execution in front of Gus, while Gus was on his knees, forced to watch. A message from the cartel: you are not welcome here. You are not worthy of doing business with us. Hector didn't just kill Max. He humiliated Gus. He broke something fundamental in him. And Don Eladio, the cartel boss, allowed it to happen. Everyone laughed, treated it like an insignificant detail, like swatting an annoying mosquito. But here's what makes Gus fundamentally different from other revenge-driven characters in fiction. He doesn't explode in immediate rage. He doesn't become erratic, impulsive, driven by a bloodlust that needs to be quenched immediately. He doesn't embark on a violent and self-destructive crusade like so many other anti-heroes. He does the exact opposite. He swallows the pain. He stands up. He wipes Max's blood from his face, and he begins to plan. Not a plan of weeks, not a plan of months, a plan of 2 decades. He freezes that pain instead of processing it. He crystallizes that resentment instead of releasing it. And he transforms that devastating emotion, that trauma that should destroy him, into the meticulous fuel of a 20-year plan. Gus's journey isn't about building wealth, though he does become extremely rich. It's not about power for power's sake, though he accumulates immense power. It's about building the perfect chessboard for a single game, every piece positioned with surgical precision over years. Every calculated move, every cultivated relationship, every established deal, all with a single ultimate purpose: to completely destroy the cartel that took everything from him. Los Pollos Hermanos is not a business. It's an elaborate front. A money laundering operation, yes, but more than that. It's an institutional mask. It's their perfect cover, their insertion into legitimate society, their shield against suspicion. The methamphetamine empire isn't about profit, even though it generates hundreds of millions. It's about gaining enough power, becoming valuable enough, indispensable enough to sit at the table with the same men who murdered Max. To be invited into their homes, to gain their trust, to get them to let their guard down. And then, when the moment is perfect, when revenge is ripe like a fruit waiting to be picked, when all the pieces are exactly where they need to be, destroy them, all of them, simultaneously, with the same lack of remorse they showed when killing Max. But here's the foreshadowing. The shadow we can already see forming on the horizon of Gus's journey. His absolute control, his greatest strength, that which makes him so effective and terrifying, carries within it the inevitable seed of his own destruction. Because a man who cannot tolerate imperfection is ill-equipped to deal with chaos. A man who cannot accept the unpredictable cannot adapt when things go off script. A man who has built his entire life on absolute control becomes paralyzed when confronted with something genuinely uncontrollable. And that something has a name: Walter White, a high school chemistry teacher with terminal cancer who has nothing to lose. A man who acts on ego, not logic. A man who is, in essence, the chaotic opposite of everything Gus represents. This man is building not just an empire, but a meticulously crafted trap for himself. And when the inevitable chaos arrives, when the unpredictable variable enters the system, the perfect machine will begin to fail, and the failure will be catastrophic. Now let's delve into the psychological core of what makes Gus Fring so disturbing when analyzed through the lens of analytical psychology. Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology and one of the most brilliant minds to explore the depths of the human psyche, developed the concept of persona, the social mask we all use to interact with the outside world. It is the edited, polished, socially acceptable version of ourselves that we present to others in order to be accepted, respected, and considered functional in society. The persona is the professional self that you assume at work. It's the social self that appears at events. It's the version of you that knows which parts to show and which to hide, depending on the context. Everyone has a persona. It's normal. It's necessary. It's even healthy when kept in balance with our authentic self. Without a functional persona, we would be socially inadequate, too vulnerable, and unable to navigate the complexities of human interactions. But, and this is a crucial but, Jung also warned us about the danger of identifying too much with our persona, of beginning to believe that the mask is our true face, of investing so much energy in maintaining the performance that we lose touch with who we really are underneath it. And this is where Gus Fring completely transcends the normal concept of persona. Gus doesn't have an ordinary persona. He developed what we might call a hyper-functional persona, a mask so perfectly constructed, so meticulously maintained, so completely integrated into every aspect of his existence that it becomes indistinguishable from a precision psychological weapon. Gus's persona isn't just about fitting in with society or being accepted. It's about making him completely invisible while operating in the shadows of the criminal underworld. It's perfect camouflage on an institutional level. It's such a convincing illusion, so well constructed in multiple layers, from his genuine philanthropy to his authentic community relationships, that even the DEA, with all its investigative resources and surveillance tools, can't see what's literally right in front of them. Hank Schrader, the DEA agent, eats at Los Pollos Hermanos. He interacts with Gus and sees nothing more than an exemplary businessman. This is not just a social mask. It's a psychological fortress. It's a masterpiece of perceptual manipulation. But here's the insider knowledge, the element that elevates our understanding to another level. What fuels this hyper-functional persona isn't just strategic pragmatism or tactical intelligence. It's crystallized resentment. And this is a psychological concept that needs to be understood in depth because it explains not only Gus, but a pattern of human behavior that is much more common than we imagine. In most revenge narratives, both fictional and real life, trauma generates explosive rage. The hero, or anti-hero, becomes erratic, impulsive, driven by a hot, urgent emotion seeking immediate release. The anger needs to get out. The pain needs to be expressed. Revenge needs to happen now. Think of John Wick. When they kill his dog and destroy his last connection to his deceased wife, he explodes. It's immediate. It's visceral. It's a crusade of violence that needs to be executed immediately. Think of Beatrix Kiddo in Kill Bill, when she wakes up from her coma and remembers what they did to her baby, to her life. The rage is a consuming fire. She needs to kill. She needs revenge. Now, the anger in these narratives is like fire. It's urgent. It's an energy that burns fast and hot, seeking immediate destruction. Gus Fring is the absolute opposite of that emotional dynamic. Max's death didn't create fire. It created ice. The trauma was so profound, so devastating, so utterly overwhelming that Gus couldn't process it emotionally in the normal way. The pain was too great to be felt all at once. So his psyche did something psychologically rare but documented. It transformed that pain into cold fuel, into infinite patience, into a purpose that seeks not emotional expression, but technical execution. He crystallized the resentment. Crystallized resentment is an emotion that has been frozen in time. It doesn't evolve. It doesn't transform. It doesn't seek release or healing. It remains exactly as it was at the moment of the trauma, pure, untouched, perfectly preserved, like an insect in amber. But now serves as perpetual fuel for a single purpose. This psychological crystallization has specific characteristics that we see perfectly in Gus. First, it eliminates the urgency. Revenge doesn't need to happen today, tomorrow, or next year. It will happen when it's perfect. Patience becomes limitless because emotion has been removed from the time equation. Secondly, it allows for cold, meticulous planning. Without the interference of heated emotions, without the need for immediate release, Gus can construct his plan with the precision of an engineer designing a bridge. Every calculation perfect, every contingency foreseen. Third, it replaces personality. When resentment crystallizes, it's not just a part of you. It becomes you, your purpose, your identity, your reason for being. Gus isn't a man seeking revenge. He is revenge in human form. And that's the characteristic that makes Gus so uniquely terrifying in fiction. His revenge isn't driven by hatred in the common emotional sense. It isn't driven by anger. It isn't driven by feelings that can be appeased or redirected. It is driven by something far more dangerous and ruthless. Absolute purpose. When you watch Gus Fring smile at a customer, serve fried chicken with such meticulous care, give inspiring speeches to the local community about values and social contribution, you're not seeing hypocrisy. You're not seeing an actor playing a role. You are seeing a man who has become so completely his target that there is no longer any separation between the mask and the man. The persona is not something he wears. It is him, and he is the plan, and the plan is revenge. And this leads us to a deeply uncomfortable psychological truth that Gus perfectly embodies. When resentment becomes your central purpose, when revenge becomes your core identity, when you transform your pain into a life project, you are no longer living in the true sense of the word. You are simply running a program, fulfilling a function, following a script that was written at the moment of trauma and that now repeats itself automatically until its inevitable conclusion. And the most tragic part? You do it with such perfection, with such dedication, with such control, that it seems to everyone around you that you are living an extraordinarily successful life. But inside, you already died on the day of the trauma. The rest is just the machine continuing to function. And so, after 20 years of meticulous planning, we arrive at the moment that defines and concludes Gus Fring's entire journey. The scene that is the climax of 2 decades of inhuman patience. The moment when the perfect plan finally comes to life. The party at Don Eladio's mansion, the supreme boss of the Mexican cartel who ordered Max's death. The same men who laughed while Max bled on the floor of a swimming pool. The same Hector Salamanca who pulled the trigger, all gathered in celebration. And Gus is invited, finally. After years of building his credibility, his importance, his value to the organization, he's no longer the Chilean outsider they humiliated. He's now a valuable partner, an indispensable supplier, someone worthy of being at their table. Gus arrives with a bottle of Zafiro Añejo tequila, a very rare, very expensive, exquisite drink, a gift fit for a king. A gesture of peace, loyalty, and respect. Don Eladio accepts with that arrogant smile, that absolute certainty of superiority. He never considered, not for a second, that the man from whom they took everything would be capable of doing what he is about to do. And they drink. Don Eladio, his captains, all the men who destroyed Gus's life, all the men who thought he had humbly accepted his place in the hierarchy. And then Gus makes a toast, and drinks too. And while the party continues, while the cartel men laugh and celebrate, Gus calmly gets up. He goes to the bathroom and discreetly vomits, because the tequila was poisoned, meticulously poisoned with a dose calculated to kill a grown man in approximately 15 minutes. And Gus took the antidote before arriving at the party. But the poison is still in his system. He needs to get it out. So he vomits, wipes his face, and returns to the party. And one by one, as the camera captures with an almost documentary-like coldness, the men of the cartel begin to feel the effects. First, the dizziness, then the confusion, then the terrifying realization that something is terribly wrong. Seizures, blood gushing from noses and mouths, bodies falling. And Don Eladio, the man who ordered everything, who considered himself untouchable, who built an empire on fear and violence, he staggers to the pool, the same pool where Max died, and he falls into the water, drowning in his own blood, while Gus Fring watches. And here is the most revealing moment of the entire scene. Gus's expression. There is no satisfaction. There is no relief. There is no sadistic pleasure or emotional triumph. There is only emptiness. A mechanical conclusion, like checking off an item on a to-do list, like a computer program executing its last line of code. 20 years of planning for 3 minutes of execution. The perfect revenge, technically flawless, strategically irreproachable, and completely devoid of any genuine meaning. But here is the immediate practical application that this scene forces us to confront. And this is a reflection you need to make honestly with yourself. Think of a resentment or hurt you've carried for a long time. Maybe years, maybe a decade, maybe since childhood. That person who betrayed you when you needed them most. That boss who publicly humiliated you. That family member who never recognized your worth. That ex-partner who destroyed your trust. That friend who spread lies about you. That traumatic event that permanently scarred you. You know exactly what I'm talking about because you just thought of it. That specific resentment that lives somewhere deep in your mind, always present like a constant weight. Now ask yourself with complete honesty, this energy that you feed, this resentment that you hold onto and nurture and keep alive, is he building something constructive in your life? Is he motivating you to grow, to improve, to overcome? Or is he just slowly poisoning you from the inside, exactly like the poison Gus voluntarily took? Because that's the brutal and perfect metaphor for the scene. Gus wasn't poisoned by his enemies. He poisoned himself. He took the poison voluntarily. Yes, he had an antidote, but the poison was still there, still in his system, still needing to be violently and solitarily expelled in a bathroom. Resentment works exactly like that. You think you're holding on to this anger, this resentment, like a weapon you'll use someday. You think you're controlling it, keeping it ready for the right moment. You think you're being strategic, patient, intelligent. But the truth is, you're poisoning yourself every day. Resentment isn't stored in some separate compartment of your psyche waiting to be used. It circulates constantly in your system. It affects how you see the world, how you relate to other people, how you interpret neutral events, how you sleep at night. He poisons you And here's the cruelest part. Even when you finally get your revenge, even when the person who hurt you finally gets what they deserve, even when you achieve that satisfaction you've imagined for so long, poison doesn't magically disappear. Gus got his revenge. He killed all his enemies. He executed the perfect plan he had been plotting for 2 decades. He did everything technically right. And yet, when he leaves that mansion, leaning on his partner Mike to avoid falling, vomiting the poison he himself ingested, sweating, trembling, alone in his victory, you see the full metaphor unfold. Revenge always poisons the one who carries it out. Always. Without exception. No matter how justified it is. No matter how perfectly executed. No matter how long you planned it. Resentment is poison. And there is no antidote that will completely protect you from its effects. So Gus succeeded. Complete revenge. The cartel destroyed to its roots. Don Eladio killed in a humiliating way. Hector Salamanca reduced to a completely useless human shell, confined to a wheelchair, unable even to speak, ringing a pathetic bell to communicate. Everything Gus had planned for 20 years was executed with technical perfection. This should be the elixir moment in the hero's journey. The reward, the prize, the cure that makes all the previous suffering meaningful. The moment when the transformation is complete and the protagonist reaches a higher state of existence. But what does Gus actually gain? Total control over distribution routes. An unrivaled methamphetamine empire in the American Southwest. Absolute power over your business destiny. Wealth beyond imagination. Respect, or at least fear, from all who know your true power. And absolute emptiness. Because here is the truth that Gus's journey reveals to us in a brutal and unequivocal way. When you transform your entire life into a vehicle for revenge, when you replace your humanity with an obsessive purpose, when you spend 2 decades being just a function instead of a person, what remains when you finally achieve that goal? Nothing. Literally nothing. The psychological benefit is control. The psychological cost is the soul. And that's not a poetic metaphor. It's a literal description of what happens to someone who crystallizes their resentment the way Gus did. Let's revisit the initial pain point, connecting the end of the journey to the beginning. Remember that image of Gus smiling at Los Pollos Hermanos? The respected businessman greeting customers, the community member handing out scholarships to young people, the man who seems to have it all: success, stability, purpose, respect. Now contrast that with a real image of him after his victory. Alone in a bathroom, vomiting poison, sweating, trembling, with no one to witness his vulnerability because he can't trust anyone. Because he can't genuinely connect with any human being. Because he has transformed his entire life into such a complete performance that there is no longer any him behind the mask. The man who seemed to have everything actually has nothing. No real friends, no family, no genuine human connection, no love, no intimacy, no shared vulnerability, no moment where I can let my guard down and simply be human. He had Max. Max was his humanity. Max was the only person who saw Gus for who he truly was. And when Max was taken from him, Gus made a decision, conscious or not, to never be vulnerable again, to never again give anyone the power to hurt him like that. So he built walls. Not walls of stone or concrete, but walls made of perfection. Walls made of absolute control. Walls made of such flawless performance that no one could cross them to touch the real man behind them. And those walls kept him safe, protected, invulnerable. But they also kept him completely, irrevocably, painfully alone. This is the prison of perfectionism taken to the extreme. This is the inevitable loneliness of absolute control. You build such a perfect fortress around yourself that no one can hurt you. But you also ensure that no one can reach you. No one can know you. No one can genuinely love you because no one has access to the real person. And when revenge is finally complete, when there are no more enemies to destroy, when the purpose that defined every second of your existence for 20 years finally vanishes like smoke, what remains is an empty man in a soulless empire. The pursuit of perfection promised security and delivered isolation. Absolute control promised power and delivered imprisonment. Revenge promised justice and delivered only more emptiness. This is Gus Fring's poisoned elixir. He achieved absolutely everything he set out to achieve. He executed the impossible plan with technical perfection. He defeated all his enemies, and he completely lost everything that mattered. Or rather, he had lost everything that mattered 20 years earlier, the moment Max was killed. The rest was merely the slow confirmation of that loss, the gradual transformation of a man into a machine, of a person into a function. And here's the deepest psychological insight. Gus probably didn't even realize this transformation was happening. Day after day, year after year, he became less human and more functional. And each step in that direction seemed necessary, justified, inevitable. I need to be strong. I can't trust anyone. I can't show weakness. I need to stay in control. Phrases that seem rational, that seem to be just good strategy, but which, repeated thousands of times over decades, transform a human being into something else. And the greatest tragedy? That this process is invisible until it's irreversible. You don't wake up one day and realize, I've become a machine. You simply stop feeling, little by little. Until looking at a pool full of your enemies' corpses evokes nothing but a cold mental check. Mission accomplished. Next step. So, what does the psychology of Gus Fring teach us when we look beyond the surface of a fictional character and see the universal psychological patterns he represents? Revenge is a dish best served cold. But in the end, it's not just your enemies you destroy. It's your own soul that freezes, becomes rigid, loses its ability to feel anything beyond that singular obsession. Gus Fring is the perfect, dramatically extreme portrayal of perfectionism when it ceases to be a useful tool and becomes an inescapable prison. He shows us with brutal clarity how control can transform from protection into suffocation. How the mask we wear to protect ourselves from the world can end up becoming the only thing we are, killing the real person behind it. He shows us that crystallized resentment, that bitterness you silently nurture for years, that anger you hold on to for the right moment, builds absolutely nothing of real value. It only corrodes. It corrodes your human connections. It corrodes your capacity to feel genuine joy. It corrodes your humanity piece by piece until you look in the mirror, no longer recognize who is looking back. And perhaps the most important lesson of all, even when you achieve your revenge, even when you destroy all your enemies, even when you execute the perfect plan you meticulously planned for decades, what do you really win? Only the version of himself that was still capable of feeling something other than emptiness. Only the possibility of one day becoming human again. Only any chance of genuine peace. The great tragedy of Gus Fring is not that he eventually died, blown up by Hector Salamanca's final revenge in one of television's most iconic scenes. The tragedy is that he never truly lived again after that pool in Chile, after watching Max die. He became a ghost operating a body, a machine executing a program, a set of functions, fulfilling objectives, without any real person experiencing the process. And he did it with such perfection, with such obsessive dedication, with such meticulous control, that to the outside world it seemed as if he were living an extraordinarily successful life. A model of excellence, an example of discipline, a testament to the power of human determination. But inside, where no one could see, he was already dead. He had died on the day of the trauma. The rest was merely the slow unfolding of the consequences of that inner death. And perhaps that is the most powerful warning Gus offers us. Perfectionism is not strength disguised as something weaker. It's exactly the opposite. It's fear disguised as control. Revenge is not justice by another name. It is merely the endless continuation of the original trauma by other means. And the mask you wear to protect yourself from the world, if you invest too much energy in it, if you make it too perfect, if you identify completely with it, eventually, it becomes the only thing left of you. And when you finally try to take it off, you discover that it has fused with your skin, that there is nothing underneath, that you have become the mask. Gus Fring built an empire on revenge. Every brick laid with millimeter precision. Every move calculated 3 steps ahead. An entire life, 2 full decades, dedicated to a single dark purpose executed with technical perfection. But what happens when revenge isn't cold and calculating like Gus's, but hot and passionate? When it's not a 20-year plan executed with surgical precision, but an explosion of raw emotion transformed into action? When does the protagonist not hide their emotions behind a perfect mask, but use them as fuel for an epic transformation that consumes everything in its path? In our next video, we'll analyze the psychology of the Count of Monte Cristo, Edmond Dantes, the definitive and oldest archetype of passionate revenge in Western literature. Let's find out why, even with completely opposite psychological approaches, Gus as cold as ice, Edmund as hot as fire, they both eventually arrive at the same dark place, at the same devastating realization that revenge, no matter how it is carried out, always exacts a price that may be too high to pay. And we will explore the question that both narratives force us to confront. Is there a way to process deep trauma, to respond to terrible injustice, that doesn't involve turning your humanity into fuel for destruction? Because perhaps the real question isn't how you seek revenge, with cold patience or burning passion, with meticulous control or emotional chaos, but you should pursue it. And what do you lose of yourself in the process, regardless of the method you choose? Until then, reflect on these final questions. What mask are you wearing every day? And is it protecting you or suffocating you? What resentment are you silently harboring? And is it building anything or just slowly poisoning you? And most importantly, looking at your life now, are you genuinely living? Or just running a program written by some past trauma that you never fully processed? Because that is Gus Fring's ultimate lesson. The difference between living and merely functioning, between being human and being a machine, between having a life and simply fulfilling a purpose. And that difference, in the end, can be everything.